You know that moment when you're about to do something and suddenly someone else's opinion appears in your head? Maybe you're about to wear something you actually like. Post something online. Say what you really think. Try something you've never done before. And then you imagine someone seeing it. What are they going to think? And here's the weird part. You might not even like these people. You don't want their life. You don't particularly respect their judgment. You probably wouldn't ask them what career you should choose, who you should date, or how you should live. And yet somehow, the opinion you imagine them having can change what you actually do. You change the outfit, delete the post, edit the sentence, stay quiet, pretend you weren't going to do it anyway. And afterwards, you might even tell yourself, why do I care? Their opinion shouldn't matter. So why does it? Why can someone else's judgment affect you, even when you've already decided that it shouldn't? Because an opinion isn't always experienced as just an opinion. And understanding that changes this whole problem. Think about what happens when someone reacts positively to you. They laugh at your joke, invite you somewhere, compliment something you've done, listen when you speak. You don't normally have to sit there and logically calculate what that means. It just feels good. And the opposite can happen too. Someone ignores you, laughs at you instead of with you, looks at you strangely, leaves you out, dismisses something you're proud of, and suddenly their reaction can feel much bigger than a piece of information. Psychologists have spent decades studying our need to form and maintain relationships with other people. And one influential body of research argues that belonging is a fundamental human motivation, which means other people's reactions aren't always psychologically meaningless. They can contain information about something you naturally care about. Am I accepted here? Do I belong here? How am I being seen? That doesn't mean every opinion matters equally. And it doesn't mean every negative reaction is some enormous psychological threat. But it helps explain something important. When you walk into a room wearing something unusual, your mind isn't necessarily sitting there asking, is that stranger's fashion judgment logically valid? The reaction can happen before you finish making that argument. Because being evaluated feels different from simply existing. Imagine singing alone in your bedroom. You get a note wrong. Who cares? You keep going. Now imagine singing the same song on a stage with 100 people staring at you. Same voice, same song, same wrong note, completely different experience. Or imagine trying to learn something difficult alone. You make a mistake. You try again. Now make exactly the same mistake while everyone around you watches. Suddenly, it can feel different. Research into psychological stress has found that situations involving social evaluation can be particularly powerful. In other words, being in a situation where an important part of you or your performance could be negatively judged can create genuine psychological pressure. And once you understand that, some everyday behavior starts making more sense. You don't just respond to what people say, you start anticipating what they might say, and that's where things get more interesting. Because eventually, nobody actually needs to criticize you. You can do it for them. You pick up an outfit you like, then imagine the looks. You type what you actually think. Then imagine the comments. You consider trying something new. Then picture yourself failing in front of everyone. So you adjust. A little. Maybe you choose something safer. Say something less controversial. Hide the thing you're embarrassed about. Pretend not to care about something you actually care about. And none of these individual moments necessarily seems important. It's just an outfit, just a comment, just one time you stayed quiet. But now imagine repeating that process again and again and again. Every time you want to express something, there's an imaginary audience in the room, watching, evaluating, approving, disapproving. So you slowly learn which versions of yourself feel safe to show and which versions are easier to hide. And this doesn't mean other people completely create your identity. They don't. But anticipated judgment can influence what you express, what you hide, what you change, and what you avoid. And over time, that creates a much bigger question. If you repeatedly change yourself because of what you think other people might think, how much of what you're doing is actually what you wanted to do? There's another psychological idea that helps explain why social reactions can feel so personal. It's called sociometer theory. The basic idea isn't that there's literally an approval meter somewhere inside your brain. It's that our feelings about ourselves can respond to signs of social acceptance and rejection. So another person's reaction can become more than, they don't like this. It can start feeling more like, what does their reaction say about me? And that distinction matters because now you're not only judging the outfit or the joke or the idea, you can start judging yourself through what you imagine other people see. But there's a problem, a pretty big one. You're not actually very good at knowing what everybody else is thinking. In fact, there's a famous psychological effect that demonstrates just how wrong we can be about the amount of attention we're receiving. Researchers call it the spotlight effect. In one well-known experiment, people were asked to enter a room wearing a potentially embarrassing t-shirt. Afterwards, they estimated how many people in the room had noticed what was on it. And they overestimated it. They thought the spotlight on them was brighter than it actually was. And variations of this effect have appeared in other situations too. We can overestimate how noticeable our appearance, our behavior, and our mistakes are to everyone else, which creates a strange possibility. You might be changing yourself for people who aren't paying nearly as much attention to you as you think. Think about something embarrassing you did recently. Maybe you said something awkward, tripped over your words, walked into the wrong room, made a mistake in front of someone. For you, the moment can feel enormous because you experienced every second of it. You know what you meant to say. You know what went wrong. You know exactly what you're insecure about. You replay it afterwards, maybe once, maybe 10 times, maybe while you're trying to sleep 3 days later. But everyone else, they're experiencing their own life from the inside. They're thinking about what they said, what they're wearing, whether they looked stupid, what you think of them. You are the center of your experience, but you're not necessarily the center of theirs. And that can make the social spotlight feel much brighter than it really is. But we have to be careful here because the lesson isn't nobody is judging you. Sometimes they are. People notice things. People form opinions. People criticize. And people reject. Reputation can have real consequences. Feedback can be useful. And pretending none of that exists wouldn't make you confident. It would just make you inaccurate. The important distinction is between what other people actually think and what you predict they think. Because psychologically, both can affect your behavior. Someone can laugh at you, and you change what you do. Or you can imagine that they might laugh at you and change what you do before they ever get the chance. That's what makes perceived judgment so powerful. The audience doesn't always need to be real. Sometimes you carry the audience around with you. And now we can finally return to the original question. Why do you care what people think, even when you know you shouldn't? Because saying, I shouldn't care, is a conclusion. You've consciously decided that someone's opinion doesn't deserve much importance. But that doesn't mean every emotional response underneath it instantly disappears. You can know that a presentation isn't dangerous and still feel nervous before you stand up. You can know that one embarrassing mistake won't ruin your life and still cringe when you remember it. And you can know that a stranger's opinion shouldn't determine what you do while still feeling uncomfortable when you imagine being judged. Those aren't necessarily contradictions. One is how you feel. The other is what you've decided deserves authority. And that's probably the more useful distinction. Because maybe the goal was never to stop caring what everybody thinks. Imagine actually doing that. Someone you trust tells you you've hurt them. Don't care. Your closest friend gives you useful advice. Don't care. Everyone at work tells you you're making the same mistake. Don't care. That wouldn't necessarily be freedom. Sometimes other people can see things you can't. Sometimes criticism contains useful information. Sometimes relationships require caring about how your behavior affects another person. The real question is, which opinions deserve influence? And which ones have simply acquired influence because you're afraid of being judged? Because those are not the same thing. And once you notice the difference, you can start catching the moments where the imaginary audience quietly makes decisions for you. The outfit you didn't wear, the thing you didn't try, the opinion you didn't express, the person you didn't approach, the project you never started, the version of yourself you decided was safer not to show. One moment might mean almost nothing, but repeat it often enough. Those moments can begin shaping the boundaries of your life, not because everybody else actually told you who to be, but because anticipating their judgment influenced what you allowed yourself to express. And that's why simply repeating, "I don't care what people think," doesn't necessarily solve the problem. You probably do care. At least sometimes you're a person living around other people. Their reactions can contain useful social information, but feeling the weight of someone's judgment isn't the same as deciding that their judgment deserves control over what you do. You can feel embarrassed and still decide the thing matters enough to do anyway. You can feel judged and still question whether that judgment deserves your respect. You can notice yourself imagining what everybody is thinking and ask whether anybody has actually thought it. So maybe the better goal isn't stop caring what people think. Maybe it's learning to notice the difference between an opinion affecting you and an opinion having authority over you, because their opinion might still affect you, even when you know it shouldn't. But that doesn't mean it gets to make the decision.